My name is David Wilson, and I'm the Division 3 candidate for the Sunshine Coast Council elections on the 19th of March this year. I'm a civil engineer, and during my professional life I've employed many people, many hundreds of people directly, and responsible for the indirect employment of thousands of others on projects that would never have got off the ground but for cost-effective management. So my basic qualification as a councillor for the Sunshine Coast would be as somebody who would be most interested in looking after the council finances and the way that ratepayers' money is spent. Now, the Sunshine Coast plans to transform what was once a collection of sleepy fishing villages into a busy, high-tech metropolis of 450,000 people by 2033. Such rapid change may bring jobs and prosperity, but is generally accompanied by excessive and wasteful bureaucratic spending. Last year's population growth of 1.8% accompanied budget growth of 15%. Now why? The Council's 20-year development plan is a good roadmap, but requires careful navigation. I believe I can help, and there's a number of areas that I want to talk to you about where I think, where basically my interest would lie. Now, initially, it would be in rates. Taxpayer or ratepayers, the ratepayers' rates. These have increased 4.4% per annum for the last 5 years. At the same time, council expenditure has remained reasonably steady at 575 million, plus or minus. Now, the variations are probably due to changes in annual capital expenditure. Now, so what we have is a situation where rates in real terms are growing, but there is no appreciable budget increase. It's not alarming, but if this trend continues, it will be. As a councillor, I would see my primary duty to do everything possible to ensure ratepayers receive value for money. Now, the next issue for me is the rail service. Now, the Council's development strategy is ambitious for improvements to the Bruce Highway. And that's fine, but little is said about our rail connection to Brisbane. The fastest journey from Landsborough to Roma Street is 85 minutes. And that's without connections at either end. And I live at Warana, and it takes me at least 25 minutes to get to Landsborough. Now, last December, there was an accident on the Bruce Highway just to the south of Caloundra, and that isolated the coast, the whole Sunshine Coast, and everything to the north for about 8 hours. Now, so all plans for high-value industries in the development strategy are useless without fail-safe transport. We need a road and a railway, not just a road, because the road can be stopped by one car accident. The next issue for me would be the NBN. Let's hope we're going to get it before it's out of date. Again, we've got great plans for inward investment into high-value industries, but we will need, if this is going to happen, we need to assure investors that they will have access not just to good rail transport, but to a good internet connection via the NBN. So, as a council, we need to agitate doggedly and determinedly for the NBN to to come to the Sunshine Coast as a priority. Now, getting on to issues that are more interesting to Division 3 residents. The thing that I hear most of all is people complaining about traffic. And certainly, as far as certainly in my experience, without actually going out and measuring it, Nicklin Way is no longer has the capacity to take the traffic that tries to use it at peak hours, and nor does Kawana Way. So what happens is a lot of the traffic is coming onto Oceanic Drive, which is becoming a speedway, in the mornings and in the afternoons. Now, the thing about Oceanic Drive is that a lot of the kids from the schools at either ends, this is, the Bedina Primary and Kawana Water State College, they use Oceanic Drive. They ride their bikes along it, they walk along it, and sometimes they're playing football along it. And it's to my knowledge, there's not been any disaster yet, but it's a disaster waiting to happen as long as we've got people speeding along Oceanic Drive. Now, as a private citizen, I've tried everything to get the council, the state government, to do something about speeding along Oceanic Drive, about speeding in general. We've been able to pass a law that outlawed motorcycle gangs, but nothing that has effectively stopped speeding. Maybe as a councillor in the Sunshine Coast Council, I can do a bit more. Now, that moves me to beaches, parks and gardens. Great cities have great parks. What comes to mind? Hyde Park, Central Park, the Bois de Boulogne. These are the lungs of these great cities. It's the focal point. Now, we have a great beach, or we have a great series of beaches that run from Maroochydore all the way through to Kings Beach at Caloundra. And they are fine, but they are hardly a focus. Just imagine what Horton Park could have been for the great new Maroochydore city. But no, and now it's being ploughed, and it's been purchased by the council, and now it's being ploughed up for development. Wouldn't it have been a great park for the centre of the Sunshine Coast? Anyway, there are still plenty of other places where this could be. For example, just to the west of the new hospital precinct, we could have a preserve for a great park that would be another focal point for the Sunshine Coast. This is something that I will be agitating for, but it's not quite as dramatic as my next idea, which is an opera house for the Sunshine Coast. Now, it takes years for an opera house to appear, and when I say years, no, not years, decades. We won't have one in my lifetime, but if we don't start thinking about having one, it won't happen. So there's an opera house in the middle of the Amazonian jungle. It is the most wonderful thing you've ever seen. We've got an opera house in Sydney. Sydney would just be a mark on the map if it weren't for the opera house. So let us start thinking about our opera house. It could be perhaps at Point Cartwright. I don't know where. Maybe that would create a traffic jam. But at least we can start thinking about it. Now they are my initial ideas as a potential councillor for Division 3 on the Sunshine Coast. I hope you vote for me.